Hi, everyone. Welcome to the RPC Standards meeting number 3. I'm going to slow roll this a little bit as folks start to join. My name is Justin Florentine. We are here on a bi-weekly meeting to talk about the Ethereum RPCs. How are they standard? How are they not standard? And what can we do to improve that situation? There should be a link to the agenda posted in the Discord channel for this. I'm also going to post it in the Zoom chat. And we can get started. We are recording this, just FYI. We'll be posting a summary, likely provided by our artificial intelligence friends after the meeting. All right. It's 3 after. Let's get started. Okay, let's take a look at our agenda here. Cool. Oh, we got some great input from Sally McFarland. All right. So the first 3 items on the agenda, 4 items on the agenda. We have resolving site generation issues. I have not run into these myself. Is anybody else feeling this pain that Light Client alludes to in the issue linked on our agenda?
Is that the correct issue? The one that's linked is about accessing pruned data. It doesn't look like it's about
that. Yeah, that's the context. If you look at the very first comment, he says, I start working on this here, but wasn't able to get the site generator working.
Oh, okay.
That's the actual diff that is failing. So that's not great. If we're going to, that's a lot of friction for somebody trying to fix something, yeah? And the suggestion was to, quote unquote, just move to Docusaurus. I know a lot of other teams are using Docusaurus successfully. We are here on the Besu team. I don't have a ton of insight into what is involved, but it's probably worth entertaining.
So I know we don't use it for Ethereum JS, although our RPC isn't very well documented to begin with. But say the Portal Network's RPC spec, I don't think they use DocuSource. We use something else, and it seems to work well. But
Okay.
you know, one of those things I don't know a whole lot about dog generation, so probably should just shut up.
Same. No, it's all right. It's going to be a big blocker to everything else that we do, right? If we can't actually open PRs, validate that they look right, and push them forward. So,
yeah, I mean, so just for point of reference, the Portal Network spec uses the OpenRPC stuff, which is like you can actually just dump, like it generates like a JSON file that you just dump into their playground and it generates a whole spec. So I'll just put it here in the chat just for reference. If I wants to click on it and look, this is what the Portal Network uses for our RPC spec. And it looks the same, but it's super easy to generate stuff. Like,
yeah.
I just know that they have like I didn't set it up. I'd have to find the person on the trend team who actually came up with it originally, but it works really nice. I don't know about what has been used on the execution APIs, but that's a useful point of reference, and it's super easy to use. And like you can literally you can generate the updated spec locally from whatever changes you make. But it just dumps out a big JSON blob, and you dump that into the playground, and it'll regenerate the spec for you on the fly, like in your browser directly if you want. So that's just one. If y'all wanted another point of reference, DocSource is probably fine. But if you wanted a point of reference for something that works really well, at least for non-docs experts like myself, OpenRPC's Playground has been really nice.
That might be the status quo where we're at right now. I'm unclear, but we should definitely review that. So I'll add that as an action item. Yeah, so we want to do a 3-way comparison between JSON API, status quo, and Docusaurus. Okay, great. Moving on, standardizing you are very clicky, my friend.
Sorry about that. Yeah, let me move. Sorry.
I also am rocking Cherry MX Blues. It's a problem. Standardizing the API to prefer rather decimal integers over hex for all numbers. So this is an interesting one. We've talked about this a couple times. We came to the conclusion that this is a decent sized proposal, but we don't have a clear path forward on how to do it. So I think I'm going to sharpen the question today, and I'm going to ask, should we update all the places in the spec where this is a failure and then add it to a rule after the fact once we have implemented that rule? Or should we implement it as a rule and have our tooling tell us all the places where it fails and move forward? I think it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. I'm just trying to get a proposal moving forward that leads to action. Does anybody have any preferences? Sounds like we just want to do it and then move forward.
Sorry, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Where are these agenda items coming from? Like who has
All right.
asked for this and how many people want this?
Okay. Great question. They've kind of just filtered in organically through conversations. And this particular issue has been on the agenda for, I think, 2 or 3 calls at this point. So it kind of keeps getting kicked forward because we don't really have a good action resolution to put it to bed.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, they're kind of just organically harvested from the community through conversations on Discord, through issues opened into the executions API repository, a number of different places.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. So now the question is, how do we move forward with it?
Yeah.
People want this. How do we implement it?
And the feedback last week was that this is a decent sized proposal, but I don't know what that means as far as how we move forward. I think generally to me that just means, okay, we'll do it anyway and get started sooner rather than later because it's going to take some time. But today that would manifest just as opening an issue and then waiting for somebody to pick it up and drive it on their own initiative. So that maybe that's the answer.
And does prefer decimal over hex mean accept both?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
it should probably be worded more precisely.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the design step, right? We need to write this issue and actually go through all the places where we say, hey, that is a decimal integer and should be decimal integer only. Like that is a quantity. Um, yeah. Okay. Well, that's design work that needs to be done. I'll make a note of that. I don't know how much of that I'll be able to do myself, but I'll take a crack at it. All right, removing aged out fields. That is a PR. This is a very, very simple PR. Okay, this is execution APIs pull request number 637. This is also linked to from our agenda. It is a 2-line change that removes the total difficulty from the response, from the block object, in the examples. Okay, we have approvals from 2 people on the PR, but nobody that can actually merge this. Nobody's on the call that has merge permissions into the execution APIs repo. Is that true? Well, that's a bummer. Okay. I guess I have to escalate that to all core devs. And I'll see if we can find a regular person that has that permission to attend these calls. Okay. We also have another, and this might be the same answer. We have another PR into the execution APIs, pull request number 600, which is proposing some error codes. And again, this looks like it was got at least one approver on it who likely does not have merge permissions. There's an ongoing conversation. But yeah, we have the same problem here. Traction. We're not getting any traction on these, so. Anybody have anything to add?
I mean, Ethereum JS wholeheartedly supports doing this. We actually just removed, like, so, I mean, just going back to the previous one, we removed those, that total difficulty from our, because that was a required field in some of our internal stuff, and we just cleaned that up recently. So,
Right.
I mean, it makes perfect sense to do this, but I mean, if Felix is on board with it, then shouldn't be any thing holding it back. And
Okay. Then I can, that sounds like cat wrangling, so I can take responsibility for that and get some engagement from committers.
yeah, I mean, here again, ETHJS, I mean, like, here again, we're not a production client, so our opinions don't count for all that much, but we would more than wholeheartedly support this, and we do some. Here again, I hate to keep bringing up Portal Network, but we just finally, we've started standardizing our error codes there too, and it's very, very nice for the cross-client testing and for Hive testing and that kind of thing to have standardized error codes.
100%. 100%.
I mean,
Speaking of
it should be a non-arguably improvement to Hive
Yes.
testing and everything else.
Yes, this is a great segue. Thank you. So if we look at a comment from McFarla on the agenda, we see exactly this. We see issues in the RPC compatible, RPC compat rather Hive test suite that arguably require clarifications in the specs. Okay. So we see things like pull request 641. This is a draft PR that's open. And it proposes changes to the state YAML. Specifically that a storage proof is not a bytes max 32, rather it is a uint 256. Those things are equivalent, however, one of them allows a leading zero. And so in cases where we need to allow a leading zero, we prefer uint 256. So I guess this is in draft. It's kind of a request for comments on it. Does anybody have any thoughts that immediately come to mind, or do we need to have this conversation asynchronously? Again, that's pull request 641. I'll just post it in the Zoom chat to make it easy on folks.
And when she says uint 256, she's talking about an actual integer value between 0 and whatever, 2 to the 32 or whatever that is. Is that the implication here?
So that's a good question. So these are for using for keys.
Keys for storage slots, which I mean, I get that in principle, but like it's easy to say uint 256, but what is the actual representation that she's talking about? I'm looking to see if I understand. Component schema uint 256. I mean, you can have a hex rep. I mean, we return numbers explicitly as hex encoded strings. I think. I mean, they're 32 bytes, right, for storage keys or addresses or whatever in the RPC. But it just seems like she's objecting to 0x as an empty value for the keys, which that makes sense because your key shouldn't be empty if you're requesting storage.
I see what you're saying. So it's almost a little orthogonal, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's more just like you just like explicitly rule out 0x as a key. Like that should be the disallowed value for storage keys, right? Because you can't request an empty storage. That doesn't make any sense to even request that. You can have storage slot 0, but not storage slot 0x, where 0x is equivalent to the empty, the empty value. I guess that's what I'm trying. I'm just trying to understand here, like.
Right. So maybe there's a different approach that we want to take instead of replacing bytes max 32 with uint 256. Change how we render all bytes max 32s.
Well, I mean, she's saying, okay, so the hex encoded 256-bit unsigned integer. That's a 32 byte or 32 hex encoded bytes. I don't know. I'm just like, and different languages call these things different things. I think it's just, different. Like we don't even have a concept of a bytes 32 max in JavaScript. I mean, we just, it's just bytes, and then we can explicitly say this is a 32 byte hex encoded string, represented as a hex encoded string, but it's going to be 64 characters long because that's 32 bytes with a 0x on the front.
Yeah.
I think it's just like it like, and maybe I'm just ignorant, because I don't get down in the weeds on some of the specs sometimes, but like, let's explicitly say it's a hex encoded 256. I mean, she does, I guess that's fair.
Yeah. So I mean.
Go put it on the chair, hon.
Pattern. Interesting.
I don't know, it feels like a couple of talking.
It's okay. An alternate suggestion would be bytes max 32 simply does not allow 0x, and that would really just be a change of regex, right?
I mean, I'm just trying to here again, I think I'm just ignorant of like Sally's like very, very succinct proposal. So if I understand what she's saying, she's just saying it has to be a hex encoded 256-bit unsigned integer, which I agree. A string or a storage key should be, or a storage slot key should be 0 to 2 to the 32 or whatever that is. I can't remember, but I don't know. Yes, I agree. Who's passing in 0? Who's passing in empty values for storage slots? But anyway, yeah, I think it makes sense now that I've looked at it again. It just, when she said uint 256 without explicitly stating it was hex encoded into the body.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess it's like not even who's passing it in, but if it's allowed,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yes, and that makes sense to me now that I've read. I haven't looked at the schema to see what is the bytes max 32. Like I wasn't even familiar with that type. But here again, I haven't looked at that. I don't look that deeply at the execution API, like the subcomponents, that often. So.
Yeah, I mean, this makes sense.
Yep.
You can't like hex encode 0x into an integer, so.
Or you're not supposed to. I mean,
right.
It's very easy to represent it as 0 if you're not careful. That's bitten us a few times, but of course, then you get the whole question: should it be 0x00 or 0x0? Does it have to be padded?
Right.
So the next question is a uint 256 preserving leading zeros?
I mean, it's just, can you, do you accept unpadded hex? That's a whole other question. I haven't been part of these conversations in the past, so I don't have any idea. But
right.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that since Geth is kind of the gold standard, they accept 0x0, I'm pretty sure, for slot 0. I mean, I have to check it, but I'm pretty sure they accept 0 as a 0x0. They don't accept 0x. You're not going to get slot 0 if you put 0x as your storage key in the RPC request.
Right. But 0x0 should work, and 0x0 with 63 zeros behind it should work.
Right, because I mean, it's an integer at the end of the day. It's an unsigned integer, and so you can convert. I mean, we don't have. I mean, we're not doing EVM math here that requires us to have, explicitly 32 zeros or nothing. Kind of. I mean, it can be a little more generous in the RPC, since at the end of the day we're converting it to a number. So it makes sense to me.
I think I like it the more that I think about it, yeah. Because the UNT56 is at least going to keep it bound. It can be shorter because it's got leading zeros. The 0x is going to be required. So, okay. All right, I'm going to comment to the fact that this was how about this? This was discussed on RPC call number 3, and no major objections were found. We'll continue to solicit feedback. Cool. All right. Everybody's cool with that. We can move on to the next, John. Hex strings, odd length strings, and representations of 0. Okay, so this is a representation of 0 in hex. 0x00 is arguably more correct, but we allow and expect 0x0. And this is within the context of additional UINT 256s. So 32 byte words, essentially. For those following along at home, here is the definition that is being discussed. Interesting. So should we allow odd lengthed UINT 256 strings? Yes, because we know what we're going to try and cram them into. We know that they're unsigned.
Why would we not in an RPC endpoint? What I mean, here again, there's no functional difference if we're always going to convert it to numbers. Well, I mean, maybe people do whatever they want in their implementation, but I mean, it's representing a number. Numbers are fundamentally not even or odd length. I know they are when you're doing in the computer they are, but we're not talking about that. So why would we say you have to for
Exactly,
RPC?
because we're wrapping it in a string anyway.
Yep.
I don't know. I find that pretty compelling. Does anybody else really want to dictate that all numbers are even length? I think that sounds like a recipe for disaster, because then what do? You pad things out with leading zeros when you need to? That would be weird.
Yeah, I don't see an issue with odd length.
Yeah. Going once, going twice. RPC, okay. The issue of odd length uint 256 encoded strings was discussed and determined to be a non-issue as odd length numbers are common. Cool. And I guess that also answers our question of representations of 0 in hex. 0x0 versus 0x00. 0x0 is fine. Cool. Hey, we're at the halfway mark. Does anybody have anything they would like to interject? We got 2 more things here. So null versus not found. This is kind of goes back to the error correction. I'm sorry, the error handling conversation that we've had. A much broader thing. Well, I shouldn't say that because these are not necessarily error cases, right? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But what should be the case consistently when the thing you're asking for is not found or doesn't exist? I feel like this is a big one. This almost feels like a potential holy war.
I mean, don't we return null today? That's what we do for like blocks and transactions. If we can't find it, we don't return an error. We just say null.
Yeah.
I mean, like, who are you going to break?
That is inconsistently specified. And there's some examples listed there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I see that. I'm just like, what are we going to break? Like, if you suggest like changing it to something else, what are you like? Is there a material like app layer use case you're going to break tomorrow? Like, if MetaMask doesn't, or if all the wallets who use this stuff expect null and you return a text string not found or whatever.
I would assume this is a breaking change and we would have to handle it as such.
Well, there's no breaking change if there's no official spec. But my point being that like it's a functionally a break. It's functionally a breaking change for every wallet potentially if they are, you know, gracefully handling unspecified, you know, responses that don't match a standard block or something, you know. I don't know.
So if we started specifying it, I assume things would break.
Yeah, I mean, for a parallel point of reference here again, the portal network returns 0x for all of our like lower level RPC calls if we don't find stuff. I mean, our whole network is built around find, not find kind of things. And we always return 0x if we can't find something. We don't return errors or not found, you know, funny special strings.
Right, because it doesn't seem like an error case. It's a failed search, it's not an error. So
But I apologize. I actually have to jump to a portal network call. But this has been fun, so I'll be back.
I do think. Go ahead. I'll catch up with you later.
All right, sounds good.
So the null versus not found thing. Maybe we should put a pin in this, broaden the discussion, and solicit more feedback. Okay, so yeah, how widely is this a problem? So null versus not found. Next step would be determine how widely this is a problem and propose how to more explicitly specify these cases. Okay. All right, and moving on, total difficulty. This is an interesting one. So if you get a block that's prior to the merge, it should actually have something useful in total difficulty. And if you get a block post-merge, it wouldn't have anything. Okay, it should have an empty field. So I think the question is do we want to have that as an optional field that we stop returning to clients if they're requesting a block that's after the merge, or is that too much magic? Right? So maybe your schema should not change just because your input values changed. That's a very fair argument for this API design. On the other hand, it's useless data that's always the same. You could specify that after the merge, total difficulty is always the total difficulty that the chain achieved once it got up to the merge. And then you just have a static value that's kind of returned all the time. That also feels kind of useless. And then another option could be, well, versioning, right? Maybe we introduce some versioning and there is a post-merge, oh, hash is affected by it. Are we still hashing over total difficulty? That would be wild. Okay, that should be a, oh. All right, maybe we should investigate that to see if it is truly useless. Just difficulty, okay. So I guess the question is like, would you introduce a versioned API for pre and post merge? I mean, I think that this would cover a lot of things, right? There's a lot of things that return blocks. It would at least be all the block APIs. So this is interesting from a, well, what is our path forward perspective? How do we refactor this spec to get rid of something that's kind of crufty? And so if our options are version the API, adding version numbers, or allowing total difficulty to be optional and essentially having it change the responses schema. Well, is it a change in response schema? That's the next question, right? Because it is JSON. So you could just say, well, it's not there anymore. And that should be within the schema as much as we have a schema. But it's also kind of a magic behavior that you need to document and present to your clients. Like they would need to know that, oh yeah, that field might not be there if I was requesting prior to the merge blocks and now I'm not. So I think I'm personally talked myself into being into the camp where we just make it optional. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
Yeah, I think optional makes sense as well, but it would be nice to have more voices in the conversation, I feel like, because this could be pretty split, I think.
So we want app devs and wallet devs. So how about this? We'd like to make total difficulty, optional in responses, but will not propose any changes till we hear from wallet and dApp devs.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
It seems relatively easy to implement removal of this field post-merge by every client, so might be more like a rule to exclude this field instead of mentioning it as an optional. I think so. Just a personal opinion, I guess.
Okay.
Well, optional implies pre-merge, right? Sometimes it's there. Like if it's pre-merge, it's there. If it's post-merge, it's not there.
That would be how
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll clarify that in the comment. All right. Present in the JSON for pre-merge blocks, missing post-merge. Okay. Cool. All right, last thing that we have here is, looks like somebody ran spell check and spec check and got a bunch of errors. Okay.
Sorry, where are we looking now?
Sorry, this is comment number 3. So the comment number 2 in the agenda here, which has a link to PR in, an issue. A newly opened issue into the execution APIs repo number 642. Yep, that's it. Thank you, Carrie. This is kind of aligned with Light Client's complaint that they couldn't build the whole, couldn't build locally. File not found, a spell. Okay. I guess we don't really need to debug this on the call. Okay. Well, that's it for the agenda, folks. The floor is open. Anybody have anything else they want to talk about?
Do we discuss SSD API here or not?
SSZ?
Yep. JSON RPC API is a topic, right? But maybe at some point we will try SSZ as a binary encoding for requests and responses, right?
Oh, gosh. I mean, maybe? This is really more for the specs. How do we specify the execution API, and how do we enforce that specification? So right now, we don't have a lot of this stuff as tight as the consensus layer has it with their REST APIs. Our schemas have inconsistencies in them, et cetera, et cetera. So I think all of those things are our priority. Clearly, the door would be open for changing the encoding format. Is that what you're talking about? You're talking about the open API, open JSON RPC spec, just not encoded as JSON, encoded as SSC. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'd be happy to put that on the agenda for a future date. but I think we're probably pretty far from that right now. Why would you use SSD instead of just like gzip or something like that?
Instead of what?
Instead of gzip or some other transport level compression or protocol, like.
Mm, well, I would try it because the data in such format doesn't even need to be compressed, I guess. And you can extract like objects from the encoding and store them without transformation. But JSON is a necessary serialization, deserialization, right?
Yeah. Okay. I would encourage maybe to put this on a future agenda, solicit some opinions and maybe a proposed design from the community. Me personally, I'm not super concerned about the encoding between the clients since it's just, your consensus, or at least for the engine API, your consensus layer. And I shouldn't say that because I'm not considering wallet devs or dApp devs. But those would be the people, I guess, that would advocate for a different encoding format for the engine APIs. One thing you could also think about and maybe propose a design for is like, well, how would clients specify an encoding format, right? Maybe you have default JSON encoding, but then they set a MIME type on their request and they get it back in SSZ. That could be a good place to start before introducing different encodings.
Yeah, there was some discussion in the Discord, and proposed solution was to use accept header.
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting.
Okay, thanks. It's not a topic for today, I guess.
Okay. I got my gears turning though. Interesting, very interesting. Yeah, because I guess a bunch of wallets and dApp devs would already have the SSC libs that they need on board. They'd have schema checking, they'd have all the hashing and all the Merkleization that you get for free with SSZ. It's an interesting idea. Cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, if that's it, we can wrap 12 minutes early. I think the recording will get posted, an AI summary will come out next, and I've captured our kind of decisions and next actions in the agenda. So, thanks everybody, and I'll see you on Discord.